Thank you for tuning into Streetside. I'm your host, Michael Brennan, and I want to share with our listeners that this podcast was started by the Student Coalition a couple years ago and is now under the administrative leadership of the Street Medicine Institute itself out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Street Medicine Institute is a secular, nonpartisan organization, and any spiritual or political views shared by our guests on Streetside are their very own. They're offered in the spirit of conversation and should not be taken as reflecting the views or positions of the Street Medicine Institute. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome to our show Kevin F. Adler. Kevin is the author of When We Walk By, Forgotten Humanity, Broken Systems, and the Role We Can Each Play in Ending Homelessness in America. He is also the founder of Miracle Messages. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it's great to meet you via Zoom. I read your book, loved your book. I highly recommend your book to all our listeners. And I want to give you a minute, Kevin, just to introduce yourself. Tell us what led to your interest in homelessness in general. What brought you to this point in your life?
So, my life verse, I want to just start with that because my faith is really important to me. And my life verse is 1 Corinthians 12:7, which says, "To each of those is given spiritual gifts for the common good." And I sit there and I think about what does that verse mean in my life? Okay, I have a spiritual gift. Great. What is it? And then how do I share it with the common good? And there's no rank ordering. It's not this gift is more important or more precious than another. Everyone has spiritual gifts. Share it for the common good. So I start with that because for a long time, I had no idea what my spiritual gifts were, and I certainly didn't know what they were as it relates to an issue like homelessness. I knew I had an uncle who was homeless for 30 years. I knew I cared about him a lot. I knew I never thought of him as someone who was homeless. And after he died, I knew I wanted to get to know people just like my Uncle Mark about what their life was like when they weren't at the Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner table. But I didn't know how I could be of service. And I had that still small voice, that urge to find a way to help people like my Uncle Mark. It started out, to answer your question, directly, it started out really just listening to people, getting to know their stories, people like my Uncle Mark, and just having conversation. I think over time, I realized that one of my spiritual gifts is getting very quickly to a place where people feel that they can confide in me and having a very open conversation, building trust. And I've probably enjoyed that privilege, friendships and work opportunities in the past, but being able to extend that to people experiencing homelessness, where I'm coming in with a tremendous amount of privilege, a lot of naivety, don't know anything about the issue, but just kind of looking the person in the eye and saying, hey, I don't know anything about your life, but my uncle was homeless and I'm wanting to get to know the stories of people like my uncle. Would you be open to chatting with me for a few minutes? Like that part of the early version of what became Miracle Messages, I don't talk about that very often. And by building that trust and that rapport, over time, people started confiding in me some pretty personal things. And one of those things was an individual who said, I never realized I was homeless when I lost my housing, only when I lost my family and my friends. And so that little light bulb moment of what I came to call relational poverty, which then led me to start walking the streets and asking people who are homeless, hey, do you have any family or friends you want to reconnect to? And talk about some of those early reunion stories and the work we do at Miracle Messages. But it really started from building trust, building a sense of rapport, and really asking this question of how do I feel God's working in my life for the greater good, and trying to listen to that.
One of the subtitles of your book is Forgotten Humanity. And it sounds like from what you've just described, you're kind of reclaiming that human touch, that direct relationship with an individual of seeing them eye to eye, face to face, hearing their story, developing rapport, building relationship, and from that being able to then be of some use. That's what I'm hearing, and that's what in street medicine, that's what we're all about. When I've interviewed Liz Fry, the psychiatrist, and we talked about PTSD, she said, hey, it's the relationships. Having trusting relationships with other human beings is part of the cure, the antidote for for people who've been traumatized. And so many, virtually every one of our homeless brothers and sisters has been traumatized. Just the fact of
And
being
I would
unhoused. Yeah.
even say there's a continuum to that very profound idea you just shared, which is folks who don't have that connection, that sense of feeling seen, that shared sense of humanity. That's a form of trauma in itself. I have had the privilege through doing this work to, give hundreds of talks and interviews and keynote addresses at conferences and galas and industry events. And the best advice I ever heard, before I gave a TED talk, actually, that something that kind of came up with and has really been my mantra ever since is before I go out there, I think to myself, remember to let them know that you love them. Because I feel like if everything else falls apart, I fall on my face, everything I say doesn't come out right, the slides don't work. If you show that level of like respect and love and desire to connect with people, at the very least, they're going to be rooting for you and maybe even see themselves in your shoes. Again, I'm taking you on as many tangents as I can since you want to hear all the stories
This
no
is
one
all
else has
good.
heard.
This is
But
all good.
but like
But
that's the mindset I think with homelessness that I've tried to apply, which is like, hey, can't change my background. I can't change my education. I can't change how I look. Can't change. I have never experienced homelessness a day in my life, and I wouldn't change that for a second, right? God, thank God. Let me do the work to be aware of the privileges I have, the biases that I come in with, the unearned advantages that allow me to trust people and not worry about my safety in most situations. Like, let me take the time to really assess that. And now let me show up with an open heart and say, gosh, this sense of connection that I feel capable of forming with you, I kind of feel like we all need that more and more. And let's see how we can lean into that. And if we both do that, what can we discover that, maybe is just under the surface? And that's really where the good stuff can happen.
yeah, so this lens, this prism that we're looking through of homelessness in America really broadens out pretty quickly into community and relationship for everyone, right? And the former surgeon general saying this is the issue of our time, of isolation and social isolation and sadness coming from that. Like we all have to struggle with this. But I'm gonna bring us back on task and ask you about the genesis of your book, When We Walk By, and tell us a little bit about it because many of our listeners maybe haven't had the pleasure of reading it yet. So tell us
Well,
about When We Walk By.
I'm going to tell you about When We Walk By. I'm going to even connect what you just shared about the Surgeon General to When We Walk By. What really strikes me about this moment is I think, especially in the pandemic, there was an increased awareness of isolation, disconnection, and what it means to not be together. That the statistics say that we're all experiencing way before the last few years, but it's been maybe even more heightened, and certainly was in early 2020 and the first few years of the pandemic. And so when the Surgeon General talks about this crisis of loneliness, I'm nodding my head vigorously, saying yes, yes, yes. And I'm reminded of the words of one neighbor experiencing homelessness early in the pandemic who said, "You don't need to teach me about social distancing. That's my life already." And so, to answer your question and connect the thoughts, there is an experience that our neighbors who are unhoused go through as part of their daily existence that we all actually have a little bit more familiarity with than may first appear, but it's so concentrated, inescapable, and really with life or death implications for neighbors experiencing homelessness. And that just doesn't get talked about. And that's really what I talk about as breakdowns in our shared humanity, feeling relationally and being relationally impoverished, not having anyone to talk to, having no social support, feeling excluded, having this American notion of rugged individualism and pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But when things aren't going so well and you're flat on your face, looking in the mirror and being left with narratives that you might be deservedly poor or you're deservedly homeless. So, the book really emerged from listening to hundreds and hundreds of neighbors experiencing homelessness share pretty heartbreaking stories, really based on this trust and confidence that had been established, and thinking, gosh, this deserves so much more than just like a social media post or a news article and then let's forget about it. In the book When We Walk By, my co-author and I, we spend a third of the book laying out all the broken systems that we think about when we think of why is homelessness the issue it is. Housing, lack of affordable housing, and, even if you have a housing voucher, discrimination in the housing sector and not having enough units, and the just decimation of the public housing infrastructure in this country and lack of investment. So we talk about that. We talk about the criminal justice system. We talk about mental behavioral health. We talk about, children aging out of foster care into homelessness. And that doesn't get talked about as much. But we spend an equal amount of the book talking about ways in which we as housed people may be perpetuating this issue of homelessness, even if we don't think we are. And this can come through, the otherizing of our unhoused neighbors, not knowing who they are, creating a mindset of us versus them, NIMBYism, where we say, well, gosh, we want to end homelessness, but not in this neighborhood. We actually just don't want any unhoused neighbors. It's like, well, you can have one or the other. You can't have both. And it felt important to write a book for quote unquote housed people, not just to look through the looking glass at our unhoused neighbors, but to really look in the mirror. And the one thing I'll just share, and then I'll shut up and listen to your next question because I'm on my soapbox here tonight. That can be done with a lot of fear or trepidation or judgment. It felt really important for my co-author and I. Let's lead with the times that we have found ourselves to be otherizing of our unhoused neighbor. Times that I've walked by, when we walk by, not if we walk by. Times that I've unthinkingly pulled my hand into my pocket and grabbed my keys as if it was a weapon because I didn't know if the person was going to jump out at me, right? And we do this not because we're proud of these moments, but because I think we have to meet people where they're at and not leave them. But the way to not leave people where they're at is with grace and humility and forgiveness and understanding and saying, hey, this isn't ideal, but of course you're going to feel the way you do and think the way you do if your only exposure to homelessness is when you're driving by someone at an intersection and you don't have a single person you can name who's experiencing homelessness. So I'm a big fan of this idea of proximity and really being relational with people as a key step towards restoring that shared sense of humanity.
The invisibility of the unhoused is part of their life, is the people walking by, the people treating them with scorn or just a neglect, not even meeting eyes, being fearful. All of those things. I think, was it in, I'm forgetting now, I'm ingesting a lot of information about homelessness, but was it in your book where some of the homeless themselves wore GoPros?
Yes. Yeah, that was the
T-
starting point. Yeah.
talk about that for a minute. What did the GoPro footage reveal?
Sure. So when I started this journey after my uncle passed away of getting to know my unhoused neighbors, I got this question on my heart, which is pretty simple, but it was like, oh, this is something I can't ignore, which was, how would Jesus use a smartphone? I was thinking about that question and kind of contemplating it. And one thing led to another, and basically had this inspiration of saying, well, gosh, maybe people experiencing homelessness can wear these wearable cameras, GoPro cameras, and narrate their experience of what life is like on the streets. And so over the course of a year, I had 24 individuals who were experiencing homelessness who courageously volunteered to wear the cameras for an hour, 2 hours, 3 or 4 hours at a time, and just share what was going on in their minds. And someone walks by them, they're still there. What's that like? What's on their mind? So I watch all this footage, and it's very hard to watch. It is very heartbreaking. And I think the two things that really stood out to me from watching that footage was first, every time you'd see a kid walk by, the kid never just walks by. The parent is with the kid. We're talking like 5-year old, 10-year old kid. They're with a parent or guardian. Sometimes you'd see the parent or guardian kind of look at the kid and kind of pull them along, kind of like the kid's pointing or staring or asking a question that feels impolite, and the parent is like, no, 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 that's rude. Don't do that. That's impolite. And then sometimes you'd see the parent let the kid guide them to the person. And a kid, it's almost something that made me think that maybe there's something we knew instinctively as children that we forget as adults about basic right and wrong. And having the courage and the curiosity to name something, even if it's a little uncomfortable. And then the other piece that stood out and really led to creating miracle messages and the work I do around relational poverty, and writing When We Walk By as a book, was hearing in the videos at some point in every conversation, the person who was unhoused wearing the camera would mention somebody else who was often no longer present physically in their life, right? But it was very much present mentally, on their mind, on their heart. And so when they were telling me, about moms and dads and brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, but also coaches and classmates and former best friends and people they served in the military with, it just got me thinking, well, hey, maybe some of these people would be interested to know how this individual's doing and even reconnect if they knew how to reach them. And that was kind of the starting point for what became Miracle Messages of helping people reconnect. But yeah, those were really profound experiences I had, not trying to start a nonprofit or create some initiative, but really just trying to get us up close and personal with neighbors unhoused, and hearing their stories, and that Homeless GoPro project really laid that foundation for that work to begin.
So Kevin, I want to then take us down that road that you wrote the book, you had these experiences, you rightly recognized and named the social and relational poverty that is endemic with the experience of homelessness, and then you became a social entrepreneur. You founded a startup, Miracle Messages, to be an antidote and to try to address some of that social relational poverty. Tell us about Miracle Messages. What is it? What does it do? Who's involved? What's going on?
Absolutely. So, Miracle Messages is an organization, a nonprofit, helps people experiencing homelessness rebuild their social support systems and their financial security. We summarize our work very simply. We say no one should go through homelessness alone, and no one should feel helpless on this issue, meaning, hey, the rest of us housed people, there's so much good work to be done. So we offer 3 core programs. First is our family and friend reunification services, where a person who's unhoused can record a video message, or it could be an audio message, filling out an online form, a paper form, calling our 1-800-MISS-YOU hotline, 1-800-MISSYOU. It's our hotline, and then having this incredible network of volunteer digital detectives that make phone calls and write letters and do digital sleuthing to help locate loved ones, deliver messages, and help people reunite with their family, friends, and people that are near and dear to their heart. So that work on our reunification services, with both unhoused individuals starting the search process as well as family members reaching out to us and saying, can you help me find my unhoused relative or loved one? That's led to, at this point, well over 1,100 reunifications since we got started. We also know that for some people, family is part of the problem, not part of the solution, and bridges have been burned and there's no one to reconnect to. So for those individuals, and for others who need a little more than just the reunion work, we created a phone buddy program called Miracle Friends, where we match volunteers around the world for weekly phone calls and text messages, kind of like a digital pen pal program with people experiencing homelessness. So those volunteers have logged hundreds of thousands of conversation minutes at this point. And again, it's you're not a caseworker, you're not a social worker, you're not a paid professional. You're just a friend, a neighbor, someone who's willing to listen and do the best he can to just be a supportive person. And we find that in many of those friendships, a person who is going in as the volunteer is thinking, well, I'm going to serve this person. They end up finding that they are gaining benefits and blessings from that relationship that they would never have anticipated. And then our most recent program is Miracle Money, where we heard pretty consistently from our volunteers that if you've asked us to be friends with an individual and we are in this relationship and they don't know how they're going to put food on the table or get gas in their car to go to work on Monday, let's give them money. Someone needs to give them money, and we trust them and we believe in them, and either you give them money or we give them money. So we raised initially some money, gave it out $500 a month, 6 months, no strings attached. 14 individuals within 6 months. 2/3 of those individuals who had been homeless at the time of their first payment, they had secured stable housing, basically using the money better than we could have used it for them. So we have now expanded our basic income work. We've given out millions of dollars in direct cash. It's part of most recently a randomized controlled trial, basic income pilot, in partnership with USC School of Social Work, as well as Google.org as one of our primary funders. And that work continues in some new exciting ways. And then really undergirding all of this at Miracle Messages is this commitment to narrative change. If you're going to change policy and you're going to change the status quo of homelessness in this country, you also have to change hearts and minds. And the most effective ways that I've learned on how to do that is through relationships, through storytelling and stories, and through service. And so at Miracle Messages, we create pathways for people to not only hear stories about the work we do, including, through my book, When We Walk By, through, some projects we have in the pipeline, storytelling projects, through building local chapters and rolling up their sleeve and offering these services in their community through service, and then through programs like our Phone Buddy program, where folks can be in a relationship with their unhoused neighbors. So that's the work at Miracle Message.
It's so robust. What you've just described, the reconnecting, the phone buddies, the miracle cash. I'd like to get some of that, by the way. Can I sign up? No. I mean, it's a robust response from you're at the center of all that work. I'm curious,
Well,
Kevin
wait, I'm
Adler.
not at the center anymore. I'm no
No,
longer. No,
no,
and I've never.
You're a PhD
Well,
student.
I've never been at the center. I stepped
Yeah.
down 2 years ago as CEO, and I'll keep this brief, but just to share, because I think it's important. And again, Simon doesn't get talked about very much. So this is a
All
theme for
right.
tonight.
Good.
So, I started the conversation by talking about this life verse, 1 Corinthians 12:7. Each is given spiritual gifts for the common good. After leading the organization for 10 years, I felt it on my heart. I said, gosh, we built it up. It's growing. It's going well. We have good cash reserves. We have a strong board. We have good partnerships, pretty good brand equity. We get a lot of media coverage, more than, is merited from our size. Going pretty well, right? Like surviving as a nonprofit, thriving. And I had to ask myself this question, which is, I have loved every minute of the last 10 years. The next 10 years for Miracle Messages, is the same skill set and the same approach and the same leadership needed? Or would we benefit from having a new leader, step in? I felt like I could continue making the decisions and leading the way, but I also felt like I wasn't going to see it through and see those decisions through over the next 10 years. So I raised my hand to the board and said, I think it's time for new leadership. And we started the process, nationwide search, that led us to finding Mary Carl, who's now been the CEO for the last 2 years. Extraordinary person. And I have learned so much from her. I feel like I've got a mini MBA just working alongside her in the various capacities I have. And then what she's really brought to the organization, which I think is healthy for the long term, is, early on when she stepped in, one of the board members asked her, well, Kevin, and he's kind of been the name and the face of the organization, he has big shoes to fill. How do you feel about that? And without missing a beat, she said, well, I have my own shoes. And what's been beautiful about that is, yeah, she has her own shoes, and she has brought even more of a decentralized model to leadership, where it's not only our staff and our Miracle Messages Advisory Council, folks with lived experience. It's finding ways for volunteers to really even get more involved, rolling up their sleeves, sharing their stories. And that is such a fulfillment of the vision that I had, which is, it's never one person. It's creating a little bit of a platform infrastructure for good people to come together and do good work. So I just wanted to share that
Sure.
there is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. What's next for Kevin F. Adler? What
Ah,
what what are,
well,
what are you what are you what are you working on? What do you got going?
I made the crazy thing of spending a year or two here in the Midwest. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin now, doing a PhD in sociology. But I'm using that time to do research and writing for my next book. So that's something I'm very excited about. If When We Walk By was trying to answer the question, why are so many people homeless? The next book is really asking this question. Well, with one out of every two Americans a paycheck away from not paying rent, why aren't more people experiencing homelessness? Thinking about the role of family and friends and relational resilience, as well as relational poverty plays um, as either a buffer from preventing homelessness or as a pathway out of homelessness for those who experience it. So, working on that book is another big piece. I have a few other smaller projects in the pipeline. We're developing a workbook as a follow-on to When We Walk By. So that will be published in the fall of 2026. And really excited. It's going to be a 30-day guide to understanding homelessness and becoming part of the solution. So if anyone out there is a listener, likes those like couples journals, where it's like
Yeah.
day whatever, and here's the questions, then you reflect and here's some information. It's kind of that style. So yeah, a
Oh,
couple
that's
projects
good.
like that, and storytelling projects, and keeping at it with Miracle Messages. So yeah, a few more exciting things to share in the new year.
Kevin, thank you. We're running out of time, but I usually like to ask several questions at the end, and one of them is, what is the question you wish I had asked? What have you left on the that's not out yet?
Oh, you've asked such
Right.
great questions. In fact, you've asked questions in my mind that you haven't even asked, and I've answered. So
Good. Good. Okay. So
there's
then,
nothing that jumps out. Give me the other ones.
all right, you've already answered. You've maybe already answered this question too. We ask every guest on the show, if you could do one thing to make the world a better place, what would it be and why?
Snap my fingers and well, gosh, I mean, if you want to really make the world a better place, give everyone safe, stable housing, right? Like this is the response so let's start with that. And then if that's off the table for whatever reason, which it shouldn't be, because if we have billionaires in this country, we should also have no people experiencing homelessness. But that's a whole nother conversation. But if there's something else I could ask for, it would be that everyone goes to bed at night, wakes up in the morning, knowing they have at least one person who's thinking about their well-being, who isn't paid to do so, and creating the mechanisms in our society so that that's not just a feeling or an instinct, that's a reality. That there's not a single person who goes to bed at night, wakes up in the morning feeling all alone, that they have someone who cares about them and who checks in on them. So,
Thank you, Kevin. I think somewhere there's a love barometer for the planet. That there's a barometer of how well we're loving each other, and you have just raised up that barometer with your work, with your life, with what you're doing, and just increasing the humanity that we share, and the love that we share for one another. So thank you for that. Last question is, how can our listeners connect with you? They can read your book When We Walk By. They can buy your workbook in the fall. How do they connect with Miracle Messages and with you?
well, I love hearing from people who share with me how the work I felt called to do connects to work they feel called to do, and what's going on in their lives and what they're seeing in their communities. So if there's any listeners who haven't had enough of me yet and want to connect further, go online to I'm on social media, Kevin F. Adler on Instagram. And I also my email address, kevinfadler.com, or you just go to kevinfadler.com and that's my website. It's one of the best parts of doing this work is hearing how the work we're doing at Miracle Messages and the book I wrote, When We Walk By, touches people and how they can share what's going on in their lives. And maybe there's ways I can be of support to them too.
And to connect to Miracle Messages, I'm presuming there's a website.
There's a website, miraclemessages.org.
Yeah.
Hey, and if you need to utilize our services, call 1-800-MISS-YOU, 1-800-MISSYOU. And maybe as just a note to those listeners, if you're experiencing homelessness, housing insecurity, or you're not alone. You're not alone, even if it can feel lonely at times. And if you reach out to us, can't promise we're going to change your life, make a huge difference. But what I can promise is we'll do our best to treat you with the same respect that we would like our loved ones to be treated. God forbid that they were on the streets. So reach out, miraclemessages.org, on social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or call 1-800-MISS-YOU, and we're here for you.
Thank you, Kevin. And I'm going to quote in ending. I love the T-shirts you guys have that everyone is somebody's someone. That's just a potent reminder of we're all connected. So Kevin F. Adler, thank you for taking time to talk to us tonight on Streetside. And we look forward to reading your next book.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be with you.
Thank you.
The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individuals included and are not representative of the opinions of the Street Medicine Institute or the Street Medicine Institute Student Coalition. Do not use this podcast as medical advice and instead see your own provider for medical care.